The night Harrison Wolfe turned 53, he sat alone at the best table in Maison Laurent, the kind of restaurant where the menu had no prices and the lighting was warm enough to make anyone look like they belonged, and ordered a glass of Bordeaux he barely touched. Outside, Toronto's November rain came down in sheets. The windows of the restaurant fogged slightly at the edges, and Harrison watched the street the way a man watches a fire. Not really seeing it, just grateful for something to look at. He had made his money in commercial real estate. Towers with his name on the lease agreements, not the facades. That wasn't his style. He owned pieces of the skyline without needing credit for it. His accountant called him one of the quietly wealthy. His ex-wife, Claire, had other words. The reservation had been made for two. He'd forgotten to cancel it. The waiter had not mentioned the empty chair. Harrison appreciated that. He was halfway through his entree. Duck confit, barely eaten, when the door to the restaurant opened and the cold came in with it. He didn't look up. He was studying the grain of the tablecloth, the way linen held its weave even under pressure, thinking about nothing in particular. What made him look up was the silence. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of polite people all decide, at once, not to react to something. She was standing just inside the door. A girl, maybe 10 or 11, in a coat that had once been green and was now the color of old rain. Her hair was dark and damp and matted against her forehead, and she was holding something against her chest, a paper bag soaked through at the bottom, beginning to give. Her shoes, he noticed, were too small. The left one had a split at the toe, and her sock showed through, wet and gray. She was looking around the room with the kind of careful, measuring look that children learn when they've had to. Not frightened. Assessing. Then her eyes landed on Harrison, and she didn't look away. He didn't either. She walked toward him. The maitre d' moved to intercept her, a small, practiced step, and Harrison raised one hand, barely a gesture, the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. "Let her come," he said. She stopped at the edge of his table. Up close she was thinner than she'd looked from across the room. There were shadows under her eyes that had no business being on a child's face. But she held herself straight, and when she spoke, her voice was clear. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I can see you're eating. But I haven't had anything since yesterday morning, and I was wondering, I know it's a lot to ask, but could I maybe sit here? I won't cause any trouble. I just don't want to eat on the street in the rain." Harrison looked at her for a long moment. He thought about what he should do. Call someone, a shelter, the appropriate authority, the practical, responsible thing. Instead, he pulled out the empty chair, the one that had been Claire's, the one he'd forgotten to cancel, and said, "Sit down. What's your name?" She sat carefully, like someone who'd been told before not to take up too much space. "Poppy," she said. "Poppy McAllister. I'm Harrison." He signaled the waiter. "Are you allergic to anything, Poppy?" She blinked, like the question surprised her. "No good," to the waiter. "Whatever she'd like. And a hot chocolate, please. Right away." She ate the way children eat when they're truly hungry, steadily, without performance, without the self-consciousness that hunger sometimes produces in adults. She had the roasted chicken. She ate every piece of it. She drank the hot chocolate with both hands around the mug, and some of the tightness around her eyes eased. Harrison watched her without watching her, the way you learn to see people when you've spent decades in rooms where everyone is pretending to be something. "Where do you live?" he asked, when she had slowed down enough to breathe between bites. "Different places," she said carefully. "Are you with anyone right now?" "A beat. No." "How long?" She thought about it. 3 weeks, maybe, since Mrs. Hepworth's. She said the name like it explained something he was supposed to already know. He didn't push. "Is there someone I can call for you?" "Family?" Something moved across her face and was gone. "My mom died in September. There was a foster home after that, but I left." She said it plainly. Not to create effect. Just as a fact, the way a person states the weather when the weather has been bad for a long time and you've simply stopped expecting it to change. Harrison was quiet. Outside, the rain hit the glass in waves. "Where were you planning to sleep tonight?" he asked. She looked at him, that same measuring look from across the restaurant, deciding how much truth to give him. "I found a spot," she said. "It's okay, it's dry." He thought of the split in her shoe, the sock showing through. "It's November," he said, "I know." His driver, Gordon, was waiting on King Street. Harrison paid the bill, left a tip that made the waiter blink, and walked outside with Poppy beside him. She'd wrapped the paper bag, dry now, the contents preserved, back around whatever she'd been carrying. She hadn't let it go all evening. "Can I ask what's in the bag?" She held it a little tighter. "Just some things of my mom's, a letter she wrote me, a photo, her ring." A pause. "I keep them with me." He didn't say anything, he just nodded. Gordon opened the car door. Poppy looked at the car, then at Harrison. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I'm okay." "I know," he said. "Get in anyway." He had a guest suite on the second floor of his house in Rosedale. It had its own bathroom and a window that looked out over the garden. His housekeeper, a steady woman named Brenda, had worked for him for 11 years and had seen enough of his decisions not to question them. She made up the bed without comment, found a set of towels, and produced a pair of 2 large flannel pajamas with a Canadian flag print that had belonged to his nephew years ago and never been reclaimed. Poppy showered. She came out looking younger and more tired at once. "You can sleep," Harrison said from the doorway. "No one's going to bother you here." She stood in the middle of the room, holding her paper bag to her chest. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. It wasn't suspicious, it was a real question. She actually wanted to know. Harrison leaned against the doorframe and thought about how to answer honestly. "I had a daughter," he said. "I lost her. She would have been about your age." The words came out quieter than he intended. He hadn't said them out loud in years. His grief counselor had told him once that grief doesn't go away. It just finds different containers. For 3 years, Harrison had been pouring his into acquisition and altitude. More floors, more leases, more square footage between himself and the thing he couldn't fix. Poppy looked at him. Her eyes were serious. "I'm sorry," she said. "That's a terrible thing to lose." She said it the way an adult would. He thought, "This child has grown up very fast." "Sleep," he said. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." In the morning she was already awake when he came downstairs. She was sitting at the kitchen island with the paper bag open in front of her, and she was reading a letter. She folded it quickly when she heard him, but not with guilt, with the instinct of someone who guards their private things. "Good morning," she said. "Morning." He started the coffee. "Sleep okay, really okay." A rare thing, apparently, in the way she said it. Brenda made eggs and toast and cut fruit. Poppy ate everything again. Harrison drank his coffee and read the morning news on his phone, and somewhere in the ordinariness of that, he forgot to feel the usual hollow weight of Saturday mornings alone. "That letter," he said, without looking up. "From your mom?" "Yes, you don't have to tell me anything about it." She was quiet for a moment. He could feel her deciding. "She wrote it in the hospital," Poppy said. "Before she died. She told me some things about my dad." Another pause. "I never met him." She said she lost track of him. "But she wrote down his name and some things she remembered. She said maybe one day I'd want to find him." Harrison put his phone down. "Do you?" he asked. "Want to find him?" Poppy looked at the letter in her hands. "I don't know, maybe, but I don't know how." She smoothed the folded paper. "His name is in here, and the city she met him in, and she said he had a house near a ravine. He liked walking in the morning before anyone was up. He collected old maps." She wrote down everything she could remember. Something in Harrison's chest went very still. He thought, "I am a man who walks by the ravine in the morning. I have a wall of old maps in my study. Claire used to say the maps were the most honest thing about me. I was always charting territory I couldn't quite reach," he thought. "That is a coincidence. Toronto is full of ravines," he thought. "Her mother's name. I should ask her mother's name." "What was your mother's name?" he asked, and his voice was even. "Sylvia," Poppy said. "Sylvia McAllister. Though she changed her name after she moved here from Vancouver, it used to be Sylvia Crane." The coffee mug was warm in his hands. He was grateful for something to hold. Sylvia Crane, Vancouver, 2012, a conference in Whistler, and afterwards 3 days when the city was all fog and cedar and the feeling that his ordinary life was very far away. A woman with dark hair and a serious laugh who had said on the last morning, "I'm not going to ask you to stay, but I want you to know this mattered." He had written his number on a hotel notepad. He'd never heard from her. He looked at Poppy, the dark hair, damp against her forehead last night, the careful way she moved, the measuring look. His hands were very steady. He was a man who had learned to be steady in rooms full of money and pressure, where other people's panic was the most expensive thing in the space. But underneath the steadiness, something enormous was rearranging itself. "Poppy," he said, "the letter your mother wrote, Does it say anything else about your father? What he did for work? What he looked like? She looked at him for a moment, then she unfolded the letter. She read from it quietly, in a voice that was careful and clear. A man from Toronto who worked in buildings, who had grey at his temples even then, who had a way of going very still when he was thinking. A man whose laugh surprised him every time, like he'd forgotten he was allowed to have one. A man she hadn't tracked down because she hadn't wanted to disrupt a life that had moved on without her, but who deserved, she wrote, to know he left something good behind. When Poppy finished reading, she looked up. Harrison was looking out the window at the garden. The maple tree had dropped its leaves. The lawn was gold and copper in the November morning light. "Harrison," she said. He turned back to her. His eyes were bright in a way he couldn't control. "I think," he said, very carefully, "that we should make a phone call." His lawyer was a practical woman named Sandra Okafor, who had handled enough of Harrison's complicated affairs not to be startled by much. When he called her that Saturday morning and explained, slowly, clearly, all of it, she was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "I'll contact the DNA clinic. They have weekend appointments. Can you be there by 2? He could. In the car, Poppy sat beside him with her paper bag on her lap. She hadn't asked him directly. She was 10 years old, and she had learned to wait and see how things developed before she put her hope into them. He respected that. It was a thing he recognized. "Are you scared?" he asked. She thought about it seriously. "A little. Are you?" "Yes," he said. "Quite a lot, actually." She nodded, like that was the right answer. The clinic was a quiet office on Bloor Street, the kind of place that understood the weight of what it did and didn't decorate for it. A technician with a calm manner took the swabs. It took less than 3 minutes. The results would take several days for the full panel, though a preliminary could be rushed for an additional fee. Harrison paid the fee without being asked twice. Walking back to the car, Poppy slipped her hand into his, not asking permission, not performing emotion, just doing it, the way you hold on to something in a wind. He didn't say anything. He held on back. The call came on a Wednesday. Sandra called him at his office, where he was sitting at his desk, looking at lease documents he had not been reading for 2 days. "Harrison," she said, "it's a match. Paternity confirmed." He put the phone down on the desk and looked out at the city, glass towers and winter sky and the lake, gray and vast at the bottom of it all. He thought of Claire, who had wanted children and lost one and left when the grief made him a ghost. He thought of Sylvia Crane, who had written a letter in a hospital bed instead of picking up a phone, who had called him a man who left something good behind. He thought of 11 years of mornings alone, walking by the ravine, looking at his old maps, charting territory he couldn't name. He thought of a girl in a green coat, standing at the door of a restaurant in the rain, deciding whether a stranger was worth the risk. He picked up the phone. "Sandra," he said, "what do we do next?" There was a woman who appeared 3 days later. She called his lawyer's office and said she was Poppy's aunt. A sister of Sylvia's, she claimed, who had only just heard about the child's situation and wanted to discuss guardianship. Sandra was measured on the phone with her. Afterward, she called Harrison. "She's asking about financial support," Sandra said. She mentioned the word arrangement twice. "Did she ask about Poppy?" A pause. She asked how Poppy was adjusting. After I mentioned the confirmed paternity. Harrison was quiet. "I want everything on record," he said. "Every conversation, every request. And I want it documented that I intend to pursue full legal guardianship through the proper process, with Poppy's participation in every step." He paused. "And Sandra, I want her to have a voice in this. She's 10, not a file." Understood. The woman, her name was Renata Crane, came to Sandra's office the following week. Harrison was not there, his lawyer was, and so was a child services caseworker who had been involved since the morning Harrison had called the appropriate authorities. Renata's claim of close relationship with Sylvia weakened under specific questions. She could not name Poppy's birthday. She did not know the name of Poppy's elementary school in Vancouver. She became vague about when she had last seen her sister alive. When Sandra called to report, she said, "I don't think we'll be hearing from her again." Harrison exhaled. That evening he drove to the group home where Poppy had been temporarily placed while the paperwork moved through the system. He sat in a small visiting room with industrial carpet and a window that looked into a parking lot, and Poppy came in wearing a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big and carrying a library book. She sat across from him, "How are you doing?" he asked. "Okay." A pause. "Better than before." She set the book on the table. "They said the DNA confirmed it." "Yes." She looked at the table, then at him. "Does it feel strange," she asked, "that you didn't know about me?" He thought about how to answer that honestly. "Yes," he said, "but not in the way you might think. It doesn't feel wrong. It feels like walking into a room in your own house that you didn't know was there." He paused. "I'm not explaining it well." "No, I understand," she said. "It's like when you find something you lost, except you didn't know you'd lost it." He looked at her. "Yes," she said. "That's it exactly." She picked up her library book, then put it down again. "I don't need you to be perfect," she said. "I know that's not how it works. I just need someone who shows up." Harrison thought of all the ways he had not shown up. For Claire in the end. For his own grief for years. The contracts and the properties and the long mornings walking the ravine as a substitute for the harder work of being present to his own life. "I'm working on that," he said. "I will work on it every day." She nodded. She opened her book. They sat in the small room together, in the quiet, with the winter light coming through the parking lot window. And it was not comfortable, yet it would take time and honesty and the slow construction of something neither of them had quite had before. But it was a beginning, and Harrison Wolfe, who had spent years charting territories he couldn't reach, finally understood that the map he'd been looking for had never been on his study wall. It had been out in the rain, in a green coat, holding a paper bag full of the things her mother had left her, deciding whether a stranger was worth the risk. She had been worth every single one.